ever spoken to anybody about this.
He was the monster that everyone feared.
He was like a shark.
5 cases, he took the girls' heads off and kept them as souvenirs.
This morning, just after sunrise, the man suspected of brutally killing 36 women met the long, drawn-out demands of justice.
Ted Bundy was one of America's most infamous and notorious serial killers. Born on November 24, 1946 in Burlington, Vermont, Bundy appeared to be a charming, intelligent, and well-spoken man, qualities that helped him lure his victims. However, beneath that facade, he was a violent predator who targeted young women across multiple states in the U.S. during the 1970s. Bundy's crimes included kidnapping, raping, and brutally murdering women, many of whom were college students. He often used deceptive tactics, such as feigning injury or impersonating authority figures, to gain the trust of his victims before attacking them. He was highly manipulative and used his knowledge of the law, having studied it himself, to exploit the legal system. He even represented himself in court during his trials, showcasing his arrogant confidence and desire for control. This self-representation allowed him to grandstand and cross-examine witnesses about his crimes, which he seemed to relish. During his Florida trial, he exploited an obscure law T to marry his girlfriend, Carol Ann Boone, in the courtroom. She was a witness for Ted Bundy's defense during his trial for the murder of Kimberly Leach. Bundy, who was acting as his own attorney at the time, called Boone to the witness stand. During her testimony, Bundy asked her if she wanted to marry him, and she agreed. This unusual courtroom proposal was part of Bundy's manipulation of the legal system. His charm and manipulation enabled him to escape from custody twice, during which he continued his killing spree. Bundy's manipulation extended beyond the courtroom. He had worked as the assistant director of the Seattle Crime Prevention Advisory Commission, even writing a pamphlet on rape prevention. Later, he joined the Washington State Department of Emergency Services in Olympia, which was involved in searching for missing women, some of whom were his victims. These positions gave Bundy insider knowledge of law enforcement practices and access to crime statistics, which he likely used to evade capture and continue his heinous acts. Finally, Bundy was captured and sentenced to death in 1979, and years after that, just days before his execution, he confessed to killing 30 women, but experts believe the actual number of his victims could be much higher, possibly exceeding 100. He never provided a complete account of all his crimes, leaving the true extent of his killings unknown. On January 23, 1989, the sun rises on Florida State Prison, casting long shadows across the yard. Inside, Ted Bundy opens his eyes for what he knows will be the last time. This is it, the final day of a man who terrorized a nation. As Bundy goes through his morning routine, drinking what will be his last cup of coffee, the weight of his impending execution hangs heavy in the air. Outside his cell, the world moves on, but for Bundy, time is running out. His lawyers, Paulie Nelson and Jim Coleman, are working frantically, filing last-minute appeals, arguing that Bundy isn't mentally fit for execution. But after years of Bundy's legal maneuvering, the courts have had enough. By noon, it's official. The Supreme Court rejects the final appeal. Ted Bundy will die within 24 hours. In the afternoon, Bundy's mother, Louise, arrives for their final visit. Despite mountains of evidence, she still clings to hope that her son is innocent. Their goodbye is brief, filled with unspoken words and emotions. As she leaves, both know they'll never see each other again. Bundy's wife, Carol Ann Boone, has not visited him on his last day. Once his fiercest defender and mother of his child, Boone had stopped visiting in 1986. Her absence on this final day speaks volumes, her faith in Bundy's innocence apparently shattered. Later, Bundy gives his final interview to James Dobson, an evangelical Christian leader. In a surprising twist, Bundy blames pornography for his crimes, claiming it poisoned his mind. Many doubt his sincerity. Even at the end, it's hard to separate Bundy's truths from his lies. Bundy's last meal arrives: steak, eggs, and toast. He barely touches the food, his mind clearly preoccupied. The reality of his situation seems to finally be sinking in, leaving no room for appetite. Outside the prison, a crowd begins to gather as evening falls. Among them are the families of Bundy's victims. They've waited years for this day. Some hold photos of their loved ones. Others wear t-shirts with the victims' names. Diane Weiner, whose daughter was one of Bundy's victims, tells reporters, "We're here to see justice done. He can't hurt anyone else after today." Eleanor Rose, another victim's mother, adds with tears in her eyes, "This won't bring our girls back, but at least he can't destroy any more families." As night falls, Bundy can't find peace. His lawyer later recalled the fear in Bundy's eyes during these final hours. Prison guards reported that he was on edge, unable to sleep. He spent the night pacing his tiny cell, restless and anxious. One moment he'd be sitting on his bunk, the next he'd be at the cell bars, peering into the dark hallway. Throughout the night, Bundy refused offers of sedatives. He wanted to face his end clear-headed, though sleep deprivation was clearly taking its toll. By the early hours of the morning, witnesses described him as pale and shaky. The man who once struck fear into others was now clearly afraid himself. This wasn't the confident Bundy the world knew. This was a man facing his own end, and the fear was plain to see. By morning, it's time. Bundy is led to the execution chamber. Strapped into the electric chair, Bundy gives his final words, a simple request to send love to his family and friends. It's a strangely human moment from a man who showed so little humanity to his victims. At 7:16 a.m., January 24th, 1989, the switch is pulled. Ted Bundy's reign of terror is finally over. Outside, the crowd cheers. For the families of Bundy's victims, it's a bittersweet moment. Justice has been served, but their loved ones are still gone. Bundy's execution didn't erase the pain he caused, but for many, it was a step towards healing. It showed that no matter how clever or charming a killer might be, justice will catch up. In the end, Ted Bundy's execution wasn't about him. It was about justice for his victims, closure for their families, and a nation's collective sigh of relief that one of its most notorious killers would never harm anyone again. Ted Bundy's life is a reminder of the evil that can lurk behind a friendly face. As we close this chapter on one of America's darkest criminals, let's remember the victims and the lesson their stories teach us about the value of every human life.